And we're live. Rod, you go for it. Run the meeting because I don't even have the notes in front of me.
Okay, so well, I'll paste in the notes to the chat here. But so we're going to do a mini stand-up first. Just let people talk about what they've been doing. Does somebody want to volunteer to go first and then hand off to someone else?
I'll start. I have fixed bugs, reviewed pull requests, landed pull requests, the usual. Bert, you go next.
Thanks. I've done the same as Ben, more or less. Probably a little bit less, because Ben works harder. But yeah, so far it's all issues, not really new stuff. Chris?
Onboarding stuff and a bit of organizing on the streams stuff as well, which I'll probably get into during the agenda. Colin?
Colin, you're muted. Or maybe not muted, but you're not audible. You're still not audible.
Let's come back to Colin.
Yeah. Fedor?
Yeah. I was working mostly on Peak, which is alternative to Jeep. So yeah, I have some progress on this, but it's still not ready to be used with Node or Node.js. So yeah, this is all I did since last call. So who's next?
Rod.
What have I done? The things that I can remember are I've got ARM v6 builds in Nightly's now, so we actually have Raspberry Pi compatible builds going out, and hopefully that'll be okay for the next main release. And although it's very slow, it's also in CI, but it's extremely slow to run the tests. So I'm not sure whether we'll keep that in there as a permanent fixture, but we'll see. Also, I'm proud of tracking down the persistent bug that we had in Ubuntu 10.04 that turned out to be a Node watchdog bug. So that was fixed, and now we should have pretty much all passing on the main platforms on CI. We've just got the FreeBSD ones that need work, and also failures for timeouts on the ARM v6. But that's sort of expected. So Isaac.
Okay, I'm not muted. I have been doing almost nothing related to Node. Just been heads down CEOing and doing NPM stuff. So I will pass the mic to the other io.js.
It's Michael. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've just been spinning up. Most of what I've been doing is spinning up the evangelism and roadmap stuff. So we now basically respond to anyone who says anything about io.js or Node.js if they're having a problem or if there's anything negative, and we kind of kill them with kindness across all social media right now. As well as been trying to find better ways of getting information out there, hey, here's a really cool issue that people should hop on and look at, and trying to get some more process around that, and eventually people that aren't me can do it. Also put together we want to put together a slide deck of sort of what is io.js that people can go and run in their local meetups and user groups and stuff. So we're getting that off the ground, and then also the roadmap. So we're bringing more organization around how we think about Node in the future. We have a ton of feedback from people, so I have a word cloud of what they already added, and then I'm gonna start reaching out to companies and creating sort of an anonymized feedback from a bunch of companies as well. And that's about it.
Okay. Quick review of last meeting. Butt in if there's anything you want to talk about from this, and then we'll move straight on. So we looked at issue number 403, which was invite Dominic to TC meetings. That was done. He was there. He was going to be at this meeting, but his apology is put in because he's a TC 39 meeting, which sort of takes precedence. Governance, issue number 234, adding new collaborators. We talked about that. We're going to talk about that again this time as a review of Chris's onboarding process. We talked a bit about stabilization and release cycles, issue number 405, and I think we've got that again on the list because this is something I think will be an ongoing discussion. We bumped Punicode API to stable. That's been done. And there were some working group reports for streams and website. And there was some RCU discussion. I did ask Stephen if he wanted to be in on this meeting. He didn't really give me a thumbs up on that. He talked about getting some docs ready. I'll try and get him onto a future TC meeting so we can talk to him more about INTL stuff. So that's the last meeting. So we're going to hop straight into issue number 234, which was adding new collaborators. So, Chris, do you want to tell us a bit about the process that you went through and the feedback and how we can improve on that?
Yeah, totally. So last Friday, I onboarded 8 people in 2 groups of 4. For reference, that Vladimir, Miknik, Nikolai, Brendan, Evan, Jeremiah, Stephen, and Thorsten are now collaborators. So as part of that, I tried to do a quick 30-minute summary that covered roughly getting a common setup together, getting like how to deal with issues and labels and reviewing, who to CC on what, a really brief architecture guide, and going over sort of just like the various sweet Git tricks that we have to do to get things in. So I took an exit poll. It was actually kind of hard to read reactions over Google Hangouts because usually it's just avatars. So the experience of saying something, I realize the irony is that my avatar is saying this now. The experience of saying something and trying to get a read on how the audience took it is a little difficult, but there was an exit poll. I got 6 responses out of 8, and I think 5 people found it useful, and 1 person didn't find it useful. So for the future, I can actually like put up the gist for review by the TC, what I went over. For the future, the architecture section seemed to be the kind of like most spotty in terms of like it's not easy to cover that in the like 10 minutes I had available. And some people already have a really good read on that already, and other people don't. So that's definitely one area for improvement. Also, starting to poll other people for if they're interested in onboarding collaborators. I'd be happy to go over with them, or even have another TC member sit in on a onboarding so that we can actually like kind of divvy up the work. But overall, I think it went really well. So,
Chris, did the one that didn't find it useful mention why?
I had to actually get the form results, but I think the architecture was kind of stuff they already knew. I think they were pretty much up to date on everything, so it wasn't really like any new news for them.
Okay, yeah, all right. Rod, back to you.
Sorry, busily typing here. Okay, so what's the process forward here? Do we want to just do a new intake? I know some people, like at least 2 people, I think, said that they missed out this time around and wanted to do it again. Do we just reach out to that group again and additionals that have made new contributions and do this process again? Do we want to change it at all? Anyone got any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to run another couple of sessions next week, provided that we can like build up a pool of people that are good candidates, which I'm sure we can. But
maybe just do it again if you have 4 people. I don't know.
Sounds good to me.
I think we could probably rustle up 4 more people from that original list in that issue.
Chris, time zone wise, how do you deal with people in, for example, Asia? Is there some time that works for the both of you?
I'm pretty much open to do it any time of the day. I'm based in Pacific time zone, so there will probably be some parts of the day that I'm not able to hit. I am having trouble with the time zone math in my head.
Okay. No, but if you think you can work it out, then well, great.
Cool. I'll do the same thing I did this time. I'll put up a doodle for figuring out a good time for everybody, and if enough people are available for 2 sessions, then we'll have 2 sessions. If there's only enough for 1, then 1 session will be.
Okay, cool. Well, let's just keep on iterating then. Stabilization and release cycle process. Now, there's 2 things in here. There's, I think Michael will start this discussion off because it's issue number 405, which I think is his. And Chris has put up a proposal for, actually 405, is that Michael's? No. Anyway, Michael will put up an issue about this. And oh yeah, that's 405 is Michael's. And the second one is a proposal from Chris on how to deal with releases and relate to V8 in that process. So Michael, do you want to kick us off with the discussion on that?
Well, no, mine we actually covered last time, and one of the issues to fall out of it is the more specific thing that Chris has been working on. So why don't we actually have Chris take it over?
Okay. So I put this together. It's actually sourced from another comment on. We have a bunch of release versioning threads, and this is sort of an attempt to bring it all together. So the proposal that I put forward is that we want to retain the ability to do ad hoc releases, but we also want to. There's also been a stated desire for sort of a train release system to give people who need to test their packages against the new version enough advance warning before something becomes stable and adopted. And currently we're actually releasing multiple times during one V8 release. So the original proposal is that we introduce 4 channels, 3 of which are primary channels. One of which is the dev channel, which is we can ad hoc release into that like we've been doing now. One of which is the next channel, which samples dev weekly. So on one day of the week, whatever the current dev release is gets promoted to next. And the current next release, if it's if there's no horrifying bugs with it, gets promoted to stable. The kind of 4th weird release is a represents the work needed to integrate the unstable version of V8 onto Next. So we have the next version of V8 on the next branch. So we have a Next and a Next plus V8. And as we hit that 6-week mark where the new V8 drops, that unstable becomes stable, then that work is ported into the dev channel and released there. This is pretty complicated, or at least from 1,000 miles high, it's kind of iffy. So I put up the PR to get sort of other opinions on it, where it needs to be simplified. Currently, where we're at is we have 2 channels. We have nightlies, and then we have stable. So there's basically no time from we release to it's out there. And this is an attempt to sort of please both sides of that. The other things I touch on in it are doing service to how we support old major versions going forward, and which versions we pick to be long-term service, to kind of abuse the term, but support longer than the last 2 major versions. And these are all up for debate. These are just kind of defaults that I kind of thought were sane. And finally, it kind of gets into how we branch Git for these purposes, since as we hit major releases, it's going to be a little bit untenable to do the development on V1X and tell people to PR into V1X. So, yeah, that's the state of things as of that proposal.
I think that the only part that I have a little bit of a problem with is the setting a static number of versions back that we support. It seems to me like we should handle that the way that we handle new operating system platforms, where if somebody's going to dedicate contributors to making it happen and keeping it up to date, that's great. We'll take it. If not, then we'll start to cut support. And I can imagine enterprise companies going, well, we have to support 8 versions back of this thing, so we'll just dedicate these resources. And I don't know of a reason not to do that if they're willing to put in the work.
Definitely, and this is just saying trying to get a exact number on how far back we'll support by default. If people are willing to do the legwork to support further back, that's totally cool. This is just so that we can serve the audiences that are able to update to latest stable all the time, the audiences that can update every 6 weeks, as well as the audiences that can only update once a year.
I commented on the issue, but I'll repeat it here. So the biggest issue I think is that it's, well, you already mentioned, Chris, it's complicated. It's difficult to explain. And it's perhaps also quite a bit of work to maintain a lot of branches. My personal preference would be to just have a stable and a next branch. I suppose there's a case to be made for having 3 branches, so you would have a stable, beta, and next. But
like bleeding edge.
Yeah, exactly. But a possible issue with beta is normally beta branches are snapshots of the development branch, which means they're useless for reporting bugs against, because the bug is most likely already fixed in the bleeding edge. So yeah, stable and next. That would, at least in my opinion, that would be easiest to reason about.
So I actually responded to your comment, but the problem there is that the reason there's a dev branch, because we already have a nightly, which is sort of that beta that you were talking about. The dev is pretty much there so that we can ad hoc release and have a dedicated channel where we make Semver updates. If we are actually updating the Semver as we're merging things, then dev can go away entirely, and Next can just sample that. The problem with releasing directly into Next is that there's no guarantee how long any given Next build will be around. So there's that. It kind of flies in the face of the train system that we're trying to build with that.
Anyone want to comment?
Well, no. Sorry. I'm +1 for current and next branches, but indeed there's a question who is moving forward to first and which version will be for a longer time and which for a shorter time. Yeah.
One thing to note is that these aren't necessarily branches so much as they are distribution channels. The branches will, the Git branches will be master, V1X, V2X, V3X, as usual. These are just ways of tagging those releases as they become stable.
Can you extrapolate on the branching there? Are you just saying that we need branches for the major releases, or we'll have branches for the long-term maintained releases? How do you see the branching working?
The way I see the branching working is development happens on master. As we cut a new major, when we are updating major, right before the metadata update that happens as at commit, the commit before that becomes the v previous number .x branch. So we cut them after the fact instead of ahead of time. So all work happens on master, and then we have the old branches around where we can backport patch fixes.
But so you're also in the recent weeks we have been mostly fixing issues with version 1x, and you're suggesting that we basically stop landing stuff in V1x, instead we move to master and then we backport patches to V1x from master.
For the current version, we would work on master. So the current major version is V1. All V1 work would happen on master until we get a patch that is a major bump, and then master becomes V2, theoretically. And we keep the V1X branch around for backporting patches.
So does that mean when we choose a long term, does that mean the long term is only ever going to be from a major, or can we choose a long term from a major dot minor and then branch off that?
Ideally, we're choosing a major, but at that point the major has got minor and patch versions against it. So we're choosing amongst like proven stable major versions, like the major version at 3.2.3, say. So we wouldn't be choosing an LTS of 3.0.0. It's the major or a long-term support for 3.0.0. It would be long-term support for 3x. So whatever the latest of 3x is.
And if by some magical chance we happen not to introduce any breaking changes, and V8 doesn't introduce any breaking changes for the next year, how do we select our LTS releases from that? We just branch off the minors?
I suppose so. I suppose we would only have the one LTS release that is the V1 LTS.
Okay, so LTSs are tied directly to major releases.
That's what would make sense to me, at least. That would be us committing to backporting minor patches to a V1 line. Or patch, not minor, sorry. Patch releases. Security and bug fix only.
So, well, as far as I understand, this will keep the train of our development going as fast as possible, but the question is, as usual, is it comfortable for users, and how much will it fragment the distribution? So, I mean, the fragments of used versions. But, well, it sounds fine for me, so I'm just trying to be a bit cautious about fragmenting and about usability because of new release every day and breaking changes often.
Yeah, I don't think sorry, you might have to repeat the question out of that. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So the question is, wouldn't it, if we would move this assembler manner and don't have a next branch, so we'll only commit to master and then branch when we bump the version, the major version, right? So this is what you're proposing. So this way we don't have a next branch, and this means that the new major bumps would happen quite often, as far as I understand, and this may cause a fragmentation. So the question is, will it cause a fragmentation, and are we okay with this, or should we select something else probably?
So if this does give us the ability to bump major more often, well, to back off of that statement, it makes bumping major currently much less painful than it would be with the current Git branching setup. So, I mean, we're all human, so it'll be easier. So, it might happen more often, but that's something to be conscious of, like when we accept changes.
How do you keep the delta between stable and development from growing too big?
So the delta between stable and dev, the idea there is that by sampling dev every week in Next and promoting Next, the current Next, to stable at that same time, that we're just rolling these releases out unless there is a very, very good reason not to. So at most, there's a 2-week lag between something hitting dev and something going out on stable. One thing that's also been mentioned is there's some concern that might be too quick. We can actually change the sample rate too. So if we want to roll things from dev into Next at a 2-week rate, that means that something hitting dev will be in stable in 2 to 4 weeks, giving people more time with the next branch to make sure that everything works out right. Then that's possible.
I'm not sure I fully understand. Let me see. You mentioned that it would be possible to bump the major more often with this scheme, but we still need to backport patches to the stable branch.
So the branches, we are, like, stable is not a branch. Stable is just a tag that a given Semver release gets tagged with as it gets pushed out. Similar to how we have nightlies now and stable, we have nightlies and release now, and those are tags, classes of release. They aren't represented as Git branches. What would happen if we need to backport patches? The reason we would keep the major version around is so that we could take, say, a change that is a minor, I always mix up minor and patch. A change that introduces a patch level bump. Say it fixes a security fix, but otherwise doesn't change functionality or add new functionality. We can take that patch and backport it to the V1X. Say we're on V2X. Version 2 is master now, and that patch comes in. We backport that to the V1X branch, and the V1X branch now has that. And we can release that as a patch version bump on whatever V1X is. So all changes come into master, and then we backport to the branches that we're still supporting.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, I guess that's basically my question. So we still do V1X releases because we backport the patches from the latest major, but the major version keeps getting bumped. I mean, the delta between the oldest stable that we still support and the head of development, it's going to grow. That's inevitable. But how do we keep it from growing too big?
That's what I was trying to do by only limiting it to 2 support branches, and then the long-term service. Those would be a much bigger deal to select. So,
you know what I'm a bit worried about is, so what you're proposing basically is we release majors very often. I mean, that's what it comes down to. That's fine. I mean, I think that's not necessarily a bad idea. I'm a bit worried that what will happen is the next sort of like stable version of io.js, in which stable as in, there's a download link on the website and we call it stable. The next version will be io.js 45 because there will be very minor breaking changes being made to io.js but they will never really get released, and then at some point they will be released, and then but because of all our nightlies, we've bumped up the version to version 45. I think that would be just very confusing and weird for people, and so I think, this always shifts a little bit over the development process. So since we've recently released, we see that now most of the work is going into version 1X, and I think that's fine for now. At some point, of course, we want to start working on a future version. My feeling would be that we should just pile up all the breaking changes in that sort of next branch, and then merge, and keep putting fixes in V1X, and then merge V1X into the next branch every now and then not wait too long before releasing it. Let's not wait another year, but maybe after a month or two, we could say, okay, this is basically our new stable version. Now our new stable version is io.js 2, but we'll just support this from now on. And by the way, the changes are not actually that big. They were just big enough to warrant a major version bump. I think that's I don't really care how we name the branches, but I think it's just from a practical perspective that works.
All right, I'm calling it. We're done talking about it. There's no way that we're gonna get resolved right now, so let's take it back to the issue, and maybe Chris can do one of his awesome textual graphs that will bring to everybody.
No, so Chris, I actually got the idea that you thought about it quite well, but it's difficult to talk about.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
It's difficult to like ad hoc, just on the fly talk about. So yeah, we'll bring it back to the issue, and thanks for considering this, by the way.
Oh, sure.
Okay, Rod, you want to do the next one?
Yeah, just in the same thing though, I just wanted to talk about the next release is going to have to be a minor bump, and we have at least two other things that can be merged that will fit in that minor bump. They're feature additions. I wanted to suggest that along with this, that we take the opportunity to spin up an additional person to be responsible for releases. So get someone else to release this one, work with me to get the tooling right, and I actually thought that Chris might be a good candidate for that, and then we can maybe start to pull in some of his ideas here about how to release and how to label things. So I was going to suggest that I work with Chris to get 1.1.0 out, and that he does the actual release.
That sounds great.
Okay, that's fine. That's all I need to talk about.
So very practically speaking, what we now need is a branch for stuff that goes into v11, or are we just going to put it are we just going to say the next version is going to be v11, and we can the merge window is now open.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's an issue where I think Fedora actually merged a minor release change, and so that sort of opened the window to other minor release change things being pulled in that we were holding off. Like if you look through a couple of issues, there's this discussion of, well, let's hold on until we figure out how to do 1.1, and that window's open now, so let's get that stuff in, do some nightlies with that stuff, and then get a 1.1 out.
Okay.
And then just keep on V1X. I think that makes sense for now. But then maybe we can slowly massage this into something more like what Chris is proposing. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, there's no one's disagreeing with that. But on a practical standpoint, this means that we will have two GPG keys that will need to be published. Well, not the keys, but they'll need to be listed. I was thinking on the README we should have, people have been asking for details on the README about how to download binaries, which we don't have. We should link to the website and how to download binaries. We should also have a section about how to validate them, where we should list the hashes of the GPG keys that you need to fetch to validate them. So that would be mine, and then Chris's. So each time we have an additional person who's doing releases, we list their key details there as well. I don't think that's a big deal, but that's just something we have to do. Okay, moving on. We have this one on the agenda. I don't know if we need to discuss it much, but Ben issued a pull request issue number 325, which was one of these minor version bump things.
Oh right, yeah. It's not the pull request itself that needs to be discussed. Just well, the discussion was about how to integrate the patch, or rather, how are we going to do the versioning. But we just discussed that, so hey, we can move on.
Yeah, and the next one was the buffer one, and I did see that got merged already. So that was implement the iterable interface. Was there anything controversial about this actually adopting the iterable interface, or is everybody happy with that? And this is just a minor version.
No, that's the same issue. should this be a patch release or a minor version bump? Well, we're going with a minor version bump, so yeah, case solved. Next issue.
Okay. Now, so the next one was raised by one of the collaborators. I can't get his name because he hasn't put his name on the README, and it's complicated. But so user Mick wanted this discussed. Issue number 607, which was about so a bunch of pull requests have been doing perf stuff, replacing some of the util.is stuff with direct type-ofs or direct comparisons to undefined, etc. I think this is just for a general discussion about the approach there. Are we okay with just going wholesale and replacing some util.is stuff whenever performance concerns come up? Is there a philosophical thing that needs to be discussed here, or just whatever?
So I'll just give my opinion. The util.is stuff can be useful, but I think for if you're just comparing strictly with undefined, or checking if something is a function, where the idiomatic way is really simple, I think the idiomatic way would be preferable.
I think the issue. So the issue was we came to this and this is such a classic legacy stuff problem, but. We had 7 different ways that things were being tested to see whether they were a string, and 12 different ways to see if it was undefined or null. And some of them were kind of confusing, especially to newcomers to the code. So we thought let's pick one way, and we added these things into util.is. Those functions can't be inlined by the JIT very nicely, so we ended up with these performance problems. So then the question is, do we hand inline them, so to speak, like what's being suggested in 607, or do we make them macros in the build so that they get inlined by the build process? But now we have this weird thing where the code that's actually in Node is not the same as the code that's being typed out into the files, and I just kind of hate it all. I'd really rather just not have util.is buffer. Instead, let's just call the function that is calling. It's a one-line function. I mean, we can leave them in util if people want to use them. That's fine. But there aren't 30 different ways to test if something is a string. Let's just pick one and use that one, and it's fine. Every JavaScript program manages to do this without any issue. It's completely overthought, in my opinion.
I thought you were responsible for util.is. So are you saying you overthought it?
I was responsible for bowing to the compromise, and I feel bad about it. That's what you're hearing. You're hearing my regrets.
So the summary is that inline stuff.
But I guess what I'm saying is number 607 is probably a good idea.
Okay.
Maybe it's if I don't know who's working on that, but if we could just type out the idiomatic ways for a couple of these checks and just tell people, hey, you're doing this coercion into int the right way, but not the accepted way, so just change it.
So how about we delegate this to Mick then to come up with propose a list in 607 of idiomatic ways to do these things in core.
Sounds good.
Cool. I'll make sure he knows that if he's not listening.
So Colin is typing in the chat, by the way. Apparently he cannot speak. But actually, I'm not quite certain what you're saying, Colin. You're making a PR for it?
Yeah, I believe Colin is saying that he's busy working on a PR that removes the util.is functions or replaces them with inline the inline version.
Okay, that's correct.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, well then there'll be some sort of compromise between that and 607. That'll be sorted out. Okay, this is not very controversial then. No one's highly attached to util.is. We're not going to remove them, but we're not going to remove them as a thing that core exports, but we're fine with replacing them in across core internally.
Would we accept a PR to start a style guide into the docs section?
Yes.
Oh, that would be really good.
Please.
Yep.
I'll get started on that.
All the more for even more extra bonus points, make the linter actually detect. If you did like, type of equals null versus like type of equals object and not foo, or like however we decide we want to do it. If the linter could somehow detect that, that would be really amazing.
That yes, although I mean that's only for bonus points. I think that's actually quite ambitious to make it do that. So
Yeah, not required.
not required. Please do the other things first.
Yes. Stretch goals.
Will do.
Okay.
So I wanted to bring up just briefly. Robert Kowalski is working with Joint Node on sort of helping out with their doc tool, and noticed that we had abstracted out the doc tool that's being used for io.js, and they're starting with basically the same exact code. So it seems silly to have two separate teams doing exactly the same thing with almost exactly the same code and the exact same docs that they're building from almost the exact same repo. And suggested, if we merge together, he seemed to get the impression that there was a little bit of like not invented here-ness among the joint group or among the io.js, that we wanted to like, no, we want to use ours and they want to use theirs. I suggested he just like, pick one and send a pull request to use that. I wanted to bring it up in this group that we have a documentation working group, so maybe it makes sense to have them sort of decide or provide some kind of guidance. But
Is it not possible for him to just join the documentation working group or like talk to them?
So we
yeah,
don't
so-
actually have a documentation working group yet.
okay.
It's all
Oh, right.
it's in the website working group because the website's building out tooling for documentation and translations, and we want to leverage that to also do the documentation.
Yeah, I guess when I say documentation working group, I really mean website working group, because the docs themselves, I mean, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, right? Like, we're not talking about how we're building the markdown. We're talking about like how we're taking the markdown that we're writing and turning it into a website. And we're using this doc tool thing that I wrote back in the day and never got around to abstracting out. And so they're in the process of doing that, and we're also in the process of doing that. It seems silly to not be doing it together.
Agreed. The website working group is probably going to talk about that in like their meeting next week. So.
Okay, cool. Maybe loop in Rob Kowalski.
Cool. I'll try to make a note of that. Sweet. So I just added some stuff to the TC agenda that somebody told me it had the tag on it, but for some reason it didn't make it into the thing. And this one is it says docs lower the maximum stability level to stable, which I think gets us back into release channels, which I think we don't want to talk about again. Is that true?
Yes.
No,
No, I
yeah.
don't think so either. It doesn't really have anything to do. I mean, of course it's a little bit related. I think what this issue is about is so this I don't know who was it, but this user is saying, well, actually, like saying modules are locked or frozen is a bit weird, and it's also not really realistic because actually we do make changes to those modules. It's just that if someone drops by and changes the module system, we tell them, hey, go away, and referencing the stability level. But the reality is that it's not as hard as it seems. And so the suggestion was to not call anything frozen, but just call it stable. Sort of, kind of done.
Okay, I mean, like for readable stream, which is now going to be stream, we're basically just going to have semver on that module that gets pulled in and vendored. So I feel like going forward for module changes that are going to break, maybe we should just vendor them and version them separately, and then that version number can inform you about the stability.
I would say that having an API frozen or locked is kind of like saying we will never do a major version bump on this module. I think maybe the messaging around I would like to retain locked or frozen and just change the messaging around it that the ultimate goal of all APIs is not to get to that point, but these APIs will never have a breaking change.
Yeah, but that's what stable means. Frozen and locked are very specifically about simply not accepting new changes, which we do, however. For example, get max listeners in the events module, which I reviewed and landed, by the way, so mea culpa. Yeah, I guess my point is that we're not really living up to the frozen and locked standard. So yeah.
The intention from back in the day when we adopted this, the intention of frozen and locked was basically that any change has to be like really profoundly important and very careful to not be breaking. Especially, for example, on the module system, like even very slight changes. Unless it's for very important, security related or really profound performance problems, like even very subtle changes that change the API in ways that we don't predict or that we think shouldn't have an impact can in fact have a really big impact on a lot of programs no longer working. So in those cases we say it's locked, because if you have some fancy new idea about how we should load things in the module loader, well, that's nice and all, but I don't want to waste your time on something that's never going to be accepted because it changes the order that these two files get loaded in or some other really weird obscure thing that ends up breaking people. So it's more just we don't want to touch it because it can break things sort of view.
I think the motivation for doing it was quite okay, but I think we came up with these 5 terms, and I think so. Like it's 1.5 years later now, or 2. What is it? I think we can see that some of it is more real than other things. Like basically, in practice we have 4 levels, which is one is like very strictly deprecated, and we are actually gonna warn you about it. We have like soft deprecation, where we say, okay, we know it's not quite perfect, or it's kind of broken, but keep using it until we invent something better. Then there is moving. We don't have many of these modules at this point, but we used to have them. And then there's like, okay, this is pretty much done. And so it would be good if the wording actually reflects the situation. Like now, deprecated can mean a whole broad spectrum of things, whereas frozen and locked and stable more or less mean practically the same thing. And so maybe it's good to reword that a little bit.
Well,
to Ben's point, like
here's the thing, like if
I think that we've learned a lot about this in 2 weeks, and if we just punt it and come back in 2 months, we're probably going to know even more and know what we want to call these a lot better. So maybe we just punt it for a few months.
Yes, it's a really fresh issue, so we could just punt.
Yeah, we could. I agree. Punting it's probably a good idea, but like the thing that I want to make sure that we preserve here before we move on is that if somebody comes up with a way to if somebody says, well, you're actually parsing URLs kind of incorrectly, or here's a way to do it faster, like we're super open to landing a change in libURL.js, even though it's basically done and basically very stable. However, if somebody has a great idea for how to improve the module system, we're likely to just dismiss it out of hand anyway, because it's like, well, it has a very subtle shift in the way that the behavior works, and that can actually break things. So we don't even want to like monkey around with it. And I think from what I've heard a lot of from a lot of people is like they want to know where they should go. Like they want to contribute to Node, or they want to contribute to io.js or whatever, and they want to know where it's not a waste of time to do that, right? Because the most demoralizing thing is if you like improve the code somewhere and you send a pull request and then you're not going to make changes there. So it's just kind of like a guidance issue.
I kind of understand this, although I would say improving URL is also a little bit of waste of time. Like if to make waves, make a better cluster module.
Yeah.
So focus on the things we all know is not great versus the things where you can kind of go either way. But we already saw that we had to revert a couple of patches that were made to the URL module. So I don't know.
Perhaps we need another label, which is "This is terrible."
Yeah, we think it's shit. Yeah, that would be a good label.
Yeah,
Domain gets the shit
awful.
label.
This is just awful. If you do almost anything, almost any changes will be improvements here. Just go nuts.
Okay, the next one, we're punting. So the next one is the Michael's suggestion of maintaining our own package registries because of hassles with homebrew and conflicts with the philosophies of the Linux distributions, etc. Michael.
Yeah, so the suggestion actually came from some of the people in the community that deal with Homebrew, and even the maintainer of Homebrew actually said that this was a good idea. Because Debian and Homebrew and like every other package manager in the world, they have their own very subjective version of what they think stable is or what they think unstable is that doesn't map at all to what our community expects. Yet when our community says apt install this thing, they expect to get the stable version that we're saying is stable. So what we could do is we could set up a package registry for apt, set up a package registry for Homebrew, and then we maintain those, and our install instructions basically say add this registry and then install this. So it would have the benefit of when we do the builds, we could automate updating all of them and updating the stable, unstable channels every time. Also, we could take other packages that were io.js related that are kind of following the same stability requirements, right? So like NVM could install from there and get updated every time that they actually update NVM and stuff like that. So we would actually be able to solve the problem for the whole community, not just our package.
I like it.
Well,
I like it too, but who's gonna do the work?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, naturally it falls under Rod, but I feel like whenever something new comes up, we put it on Chris. So.
Actually, guys, I think I have an idea. It could be a new person. So I was recently talking to the guys who was very, very interested to contributing to io.js. So maybe we should consider some new blood, fresh blood.
Well, I think Aria will do the Homebrew one. Like Aria's already maintaining a Homebrew tab, so like Aria will get him on board and work. I think that like it probably should live inside of the build working group. I don't know what that sounds about right, Rod, right?
Yeah. I'm just
Probably.
I just want to announce them before I will talk to them about this topic. So probably we could defer a bit the decision on the person to give me a time to talk to these guys.
I had an update from Chris Lay this morning that he's nearly got working Debian and Ubuntu repos, and
Okay,
I think also rel compatible repos ready for io.js. But it still comes back to that thing of what are we like, because we're currently for the Debian ones anyway. We have a Node Devil package that you can install to get 0.11. If we've got this release chain with 4 different types of releases, are we going to offer those as options for people, or are we just going to offer stable?
Well, no, I think actually what if you look at those package managers, they have sort of built-in targets for an unstable line and a stable line. What we need to do is we need to make sure that what we think is stable and unstable lines are making it in there, not what apt thinks, or like the maintainers of Debian think or whatever. That's all.
Well, I think part of the problem here is that the sort of channel you're on, like the Ubuntu, you're on a particular version of Ubuntu, and they're basically not going to upgrade to a new major version of whatever product until they get like until the distribution itself releases a new major version. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but
this actually fixes that. So what we're saying is that what you do is you say add our registry and then install it from that registry. And if you say update that package, you're actually going to update it out of our registry, not out of theirs. So it actually doesn't matter what they think about this.
Sounds like a good idea, yeah.
The other thing that I was thinking is that, especially if we're taking other people's packages, it'd be great if we had one repo where we had the metadata for all of this, and then some kind of automated way of, Homebrew and apt and all of those other guys sort of pulling out this JSON file so that when we get updates from other people, it's a lot simpler as a PR. If we did like a registry as an individual repo, you'd have to do like 4 PRs if you wanted to update a package, right?
So this is for external packages, not core packages, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, so this already happened with that package Nye. Like, somebody wrote an io.js version manager that's like NVM, and they can't get it into Homebrew because the Homebrew guy's like, you just wrote this. So we could take that package, for instance.
Wow. Okay. So we'd becoming an NPM for non-NPM things.
We're actually becoming npm for operating systems that aren't just installing packages from npm. It's very complicated.
It's an NPM for package managers.
Can we put Bower in it too?
Probably should. Probably should put NPM. I was actually just thinking we need a build of NPM for each of those things. Just for maximum meta-ness.
Awesome.
I want the whole registry to be installable with npm, so I can install npm from the registry and then install from npm.
All right, next subject.
Working groups PR. This is Michael again. His proposal for how the working group should work. That's issue number 599. Michael.
Yeah, so I've got to update it with the feedback that we've gotten so far, but the sort of working consensus right now is that we're really just formalizing what we already have with build and streams and the website. This sort of like guarantees them some level of autonomy, and it's a bit forward-looking, but it basically gives them the kind of autonomy that the TC has over some amount of work. So if we say like you have this working group and your own committers, then you also, like you can tell us to go fuck off. Like you actually get control of your work, which is, why we started this whole thing in the first place. In terms of like oversight, if that working group ever got so crazy and so out of line with what the TC wanted, the recourse that the TC has basically is to just revoke the whole charter. So we basically just say, okay, now this is actually not your responsibility anymore. The TC is going to do all of the work. So essentially, it's this nice balance of if you're going to take on the work, then you own it and you can drive it. And if you get so crazy out of line with what the project really thinks that you should be doing, then we just take back the work and the responsibility of doing it. So that's sort of where it's at.
Michael, I saw your issue. What I didn't quite understand was, does that mean that a working group gets a free pass to land their changes in io.js?
Oh, absolutely not. No. There's like either one or potentially many repos that a working group will have control over. So like the website working group runs the website, and maybe there's like at some point another docs repo or another internationalization repo that also falls under the website or falls under some documentation team. But no. They don't get a commit bit in io.js. One of the reasons to do this actually is so that this working group and the list of committers is separated from the core project.
Well, it seems reasonable to me. Yeah, as long as it doesn't mean that, for example, the readable streams group switches to CoffeeScript or something like that.
Again, you can just revoke the whole charter, but that would be grounds to do that. But I think the other thing too is that like when we set up the charters, we can be really explicit about what they get responsibility over. So, for instance, like the streams working group works on the readable stream implementation, and then they basically tell the TC, you should take this version. They don't get to dictate what version gets vendored in a node release. So if they break some compatibility and the TC doesn't think that it should ship yet, they still have overview over that. Right.
Yeah, well, seems perfectly reasonable to me.
Yeah, it seems okay, and I like the sort of extra scalability that it gives to the project. So
the only clarification I was after, which I think Michael's provided anyway, was the relationship with the TC, and because the proposal suggests that these things should be basically completely separate and not even under the TC's guidance. But I think, Michael, you had a compromise for that, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the revoking the charter, right? So they are outside of the TC. Like the TC can't pop in and just tell them what to do. But if the TC wants to just take back over that work, then they can revoke the charter.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a good idea. Like, I mean, the TC is a small group. Like, we should hopefully not have to look at any idea, any proposal that ever comes up. It's good if working groups can deal with that, and we have the stake of saying, well, if you really mess up, or like what I think would be more likely to happen, a working group doesn't actually do very much, or it doesn't really do anything at all. Under those situations, we can effectively just disband it, and that seems fine. Hopefully, we'll never have to do that. So yeah, that's good.
Well, there are also working groups that you could imagine by design disbanding, right? Like Chris has already said, like, eventually the streams group may just dissolve. Like, if it gets streams to a point that we're all really happy with it, there's not going to be enough people interested in only maintaining readable streams and talking about it to keep the working group alive. So you just dissolve it, and it folds back into TC.
Okay. Well, I mean, like, situation where everybody is really happy, that never really happens. Okay.
Right.
People might lose interest. I think that's the more like sort of natural way in which these things get resolved.
Okay, seems like we have consensus. I'll get the updates into the PR, and then we can get them.
Cool. Do we have any more agenda items, or?
The next one, really quick, that you're gonna love, Bert, is can we remove the unstable thing from the website? So we're not.
Yes, I was gonna say that.
We're not marking it stable. We're not saying it's stable, but we're not saying it's unstable, and basically putting a big warning on it that says don't download this.
The issue I have with unstable is, like, stable and unstable in Node's troubled past. This always meant API is unstable. But that's not true. The API is stable. We are very strict. We're sticking to Semver, so it's weird to say it's unstable. When we just released, it made sense to say beta quality, because it had been so long before we had released that we weren't sure if there would be showstopper bugs in there. Actually, it turns out it's great. It's fine. io.js works good. It's not worse than any previous version of Node, so why do we have to scare people away by saying it's unstable while it's actually not unstable and it's not even beta? That's just the only concern that I've heard is V8, but I don't know the details of that, so I'd like to have Ben's input on that.
What exactly is the question about V8?
Whether the current, like, io.js currently ships with a version of V8 which is not, maybe not stable, whatever. So would we be comfortable saying io.js is good to use with the current version of V8?
Like that. So, okay, the current V8 version is unstable-ish, insofar that it's still undergoing development upstream. But presumably it will stabilize in about 3 to 4 weeks from now, when it ships in Chrome 41, I think. What would my advice be? Yeah, let's change it to unstable-ish on the website. Unstable-ish is a word, right?
Oh my goodness.
No, hold on.
No.
The suggestion is just to remove the term unstable. So we don't put the term stable on it, but we also don't call it unstable anymore. It's just, hey, this is a release of software. And once it's March and V8 says that there's this stable version, and then we have a line, like a canary line and a stable line, then we'll mark them some kind of version of stable, unstable, whatever. We'll figure out that messaging later. But for now, just remove stable, the unstable word from the website.
Yes, and realistically, like, if this line of V8 will make breaking changes, we should consider whether we want to actually update it or just stick to. I mean, what we have now works, right? And it would be really bad for our users if we said, well, you know what, we're gonna break stuff in version 1.0.5 because V8 decided to, and we are stuck to this version of V8. That would be weird. I would just say, this is stable. io.js will not get any more stable if the quality of this V8 version is good, but it seems good.
Yeah, and it is. And what's more, the 4.1 branch only gets, so far has only received bug fixes, which is good. But it's conceivable that upstream V8 finds some major issue and decides that they need to rework, I don't know, the whole persistent API again. Something that would be a major API or ABI breaking change.
In which case, we just won't upgrade. Not on this version of io.js. But, we could do it in io.js 2, but, or
Yeah,
io.js 1.1,
certainly.
right?
But then, well, then we're in something of a conundrum in that we might have trouble cherry picking bug fixes from upstream.
Yeah, I don't really want to do it.
Yeah, me neither. I would just. Well, I kind of understand Bert's point.
Well, like calling it unstable doesn't actually get us out of this. I mean, we're still using semver, so if they made a big breaking change, we would have to consider whether or not we were going to break semver and not do a major version bump to get the new one, or what we were going to do in that case anyway. So
yes, and our answer would be we would not break semver.
Yeah, I think that's actually a separate conversation. I think that I don't want to commit to saying stable when we're not taking a stable V8, but I also don't. Saying unstable is really disingenuous in that this version of V8 is probably a lot safer and more stable than the one that was shipped in the last stable version of Node, which is ancient. So I would like the messaging to just say, like, this is a release of software with this version number. Like, that's it.
So, you know what? According to your working group's proposal, this is an issue for the website group. So, Michael, I think you should just take this and decide it with the website group.
Okay.
Yes, and here's the formal advice of the TC is to remove the unstable label.
Okay, I think we're done.
There's just one more thing I just wanted to point out, which is issue number 631, which was Caitlin's issue from yesterday, which was Node shouldn't break any other. Node and io.js shouldn't break each other. This is that whole thing that people have been making a fuss about. Like, people have been downloading the software and to try it out and finding that it overwrites Node with a symlink, and that's quite upsetting to people apparently, because they want to go back to Node and they didn't get that expectation right. The message that has basically been piled on in that issue is that we as a collective don't think you should be running both. So just choose one and use it. I'm not sure that's exactly the right message we want to be putting at this point, but I just want to encourage you guys to have a look in that issue and contribute there if you think there's a better message or better way forward with this. Otherwise, I just don't see this issue being closed because it's sort of almost controversy.
Yeah, I mean, the intention of the issue is good, but it's not the symlink. It's that you simply can't install Node and io.js side by side, at least not to the same directory, because it's not just a symlink. It's also all the headers and the Node modules directory in npm and so on and so on. They stamp on each other, and well, yeah. I don't see a way around that.
I think we should open an issue on the website group to write new installation documentation that is far more thorough. And the first thing the installation documentation right now should probably be, if you want to run multiple versions of io.js and Node.js, you should use it. And from there we talk about, the cap that we have and Debian stuff, and we actually break down all the different ways to install the recommended.
That's a good idea. Better documentation, I think, is the solution here. Because I think this is all about a mismatch between user expectations and our own expectations, since we're so deep in this thing, and we see this as the successor to 0.11 and 0.10, but that's not really a widespread perception yet. So better documentation.
Yeah, better documentation would help. I think there's also not much agreement. So I've seen this issue about how just stepping on Node, but actually on the Windows side of things, I get bugs because people expect the io.js installer to step on Node, and it doesn't. And so, yeah, it's just hard to tell what people want, and not everybody wants the same. I think if we were, in a way, I would kind of like it to be able to run stuff side by side, but it's just far out, as Ben described. There's too much stuff that would need to be resolved. maybe in a long-term future.
Yeah, and even if
hopefully we don't need that.
yeah, but even if io.js resolved the issues, the moment you install Node again, it would stamp on io.js, and yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a perfect solution. Certainly not near term.
Well, so I think one of the solutions would be if people were explicit about the versions they were running. So, like right now we've all, everything should be called Node. Even io.js should be called Node. I think, for example, my experience with Python is it's actually kind of nice if your Python 2 binary is called Python 2 and your Python 3 binary is Python 3. And I can imagine the same thing with Node or with io.js where you explicitly say I want to run io.js 2. But that's I have 5 minutes left. It's a little bit too much to debate right now. So realistically, we can't really do anything about it. It would be nice to make the installer warn people and have better docs. Yeah.
The other problem here is that OS X has terrible uninstall facilities. In other words, none. And that I think that that's a big problem here as well that people are experiencing. They install this thing, it overwrites Node. They can't uninstall it because you just can't do that. So better docs about how to just install Node over the top or manually remove or whatever. Okay, that's fine. I think let's punt this to the website group for better docs. Okay, so do we want to do working group reports? Is there anything to report? I think Chris, you're organising a meeting for streams. First meeting.
It's looking to be like it'll be this Friday at 9 a.m. Sorry, Rod. But if there's still 3 people haven't responded, so that might change. But soon, very soon.
Website group, anything to report there, Michael?
Not much more than we already talked about. I mean, there's not a meeting this week. There's one next week, and I'm sure that I'll get a much bigger update then. We have a lot to talk about in that one. So there's proposals to bring the docs over and take more responsibility for the docs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Not much to report. And build. The biggest thing to report is that I'm trying to is the v6, but also getting additional people involved in releases, so it's not just my name everywhere, and there's more scalability here. Okay, so next meeting, no problems with doing this again in a week. Is that okay? We don't have any special holidays or anything on that day. That would be the 4th, of February.
Yeah, it's good for me. Is Trevor going to be moved by then? Is he going to be back?
That's a good question, and I should know the answer to that. I think he's moving today. No, this week. I don't know. He'll be back. He'll be alright, I think. Checking Slack.
It's the one after that I think will be a problem because it's like right in the middle of Node Summit. So.
Yeah, that won't work for me, I guess, either. But we can deal with that next week. Next week, same time is good for me.
Okay.
Will we have enough people in town to just do it at my house or something?
You could do, yeah.
Have you moved to not Oakland already?
No, I live in Oakland, but I have an event space now, so we can we have a bunch of room.
Cool. Yeah, well, let's talk about it next week. We'll see who's in town.
Yep.
Okay, great. Let's wrap it up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, all. It was productive.
Thank you. Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, all.